Don't you hate it when the Otome game ends, your fiancé breaks up with you, and the memories of your old life come slamming into your brain all at the same time? This is the opening scene from Accomplishments of the Duke's Daughter, my newest obsession. Huge thanks to Patreon supporter Mr. Waffles for asking me to read this series. Over on my Patreon, I have a tier where supporters can request I read a manga or light novel, or watch an anime, and I will do a review video on the series. Before we get started, please remember to like and subscribe. I really enjoy making these videos, but I haven't had as much time recently to upload as much as I'd like. But if I can continue growing this channel and get more Patreon supporters, that will mean more time for videos. I'd love to turn this into a full-time career one day, but we've got a long way to go before that happens. As a longtime supporter of this channel, Mr. Waffles knows that I generally prefer light novels over manga. The reason for this is a fairly simple cost-to-story ratio. Generally, a single light novel will have about 3 manga volumes worth of content. I've seen this ratio before numerous times, but some examples include I'm the Villainess, so I'm taming the final boss, Trapped in a Dating Sim, the world of Otome games is tough for mobs, and Accomplishments of the Duke's Daughter. Given the choice between spending $30 or $10 for the same amount of story, I tend to go with the $10 option. That's not to say I don't enjoy manga, I absolutely do. But light novels are a much cheaper option, and when you're on a budget, they're the way to go. Now, Mr. Waffles has been in love with Accomplishments of the Duke's Daughter for a long time. He's told me that it's one of his favorite manga series, and he wanted to know how the light novel compares. So he asked me to focus this video on the light novel. So, using his Patreon pledge, I purchased the first 2 novels. I then read them in 2 days and bought the rest of the series out of my own pocket. Which, as it turns out, was a bit of a mistake, but we'll get to that later. For this video, I will only be covering events that happen in the first light novel, or the first 3 volumes of the manga. So consider this your spoiler warning. But again, it's only the opening act. Our series begins with the titular Duke's daughter, Iris Armelia, being dumped by her betrothed, Prince Edward. Iris realizes her life is over, and her life flashes before her eyes. However, it's not just the life of a 16-year-old Duke's daughter. It's also the life of a mid-30s Japanese office lady, one who played an awful lot of Otome games. In fact, she remembers this exact scene from the perspective of the hero. Here she is being pinned and forced to kneel by Dorson, the son of the leader of the Knights, embarrassed in front of the entire school. Her ex-fiancé the prince, his new girlfriend Yuri, and even her own brother Burns stand against her. The scene is set for her banishment and downfall. Iris remembers what happens next in the game. She's sent to a convent to live out the rest of her days in seclusion. Iris is enraged. For some people, rage is an inferno. Their anger burns hot and they lash out. For others, rage is cold. They seem to shut off their emotions. In reality, all anger is hot, but what matters is if you let it control you or if you control your rage. Iris is the latter. Her entire world has just been shattered, but the mature side of her knows that this is it. She needs to change her fate, and she has only seconds to do so. First of all, she calls Dorson out on his vulgar behavior. The son of a knight holding down a frail woman against her will? Is that honor? She mocks the men for creating a scene simply to confirm something they already know. Why did she bully and harass Yuri? She turns and gracefully thanks the classmates for the memories they helped create and bids them farewell. It's all she can do to keep her emotions in check. As she turns to leave, Edward demands that she apologize. Iris refuses. She is proud of her actions. Her emotions finally get the best of her. This woman has already taken her position, her fiancé. She will not allow her to take her pride. No more! She storms out, ignoring the shouts of the prince and his entourage. On the carriage ride back to her father's mansion in the capital, she begins to think desperately of how she can salvage this situation. After all, in the Otome game, she's first put on house arrest and then banished to a nunnery. and so she must think of a solution. Something to impress her father so that she's not sent away. But what? Iris decides to go with naked honesty. It's a good thing she's no longer engaged to the second prince. After all, her father really wanted her to be engaged to the first prince. But now she's free. Besides, her brother Bird is now part of his faction. She asks her father to use her as he sees fit. Her father's impressed and sends her home. She is to be on house arrest, but no one will be there to keep an eye on her. Also, she'll be acting governor, ruler of the family's duchy in all but name. And so our story begins. The first thing Iris does after arriving in her ancestral home is to ask her family's butler if she can see the accounting books. You see, in her previous life in Japan, Iris wasn't just a 30-something office lady. She was an accountant who worked for the tax department in Tokyo. Basically, imagine an IRS auditor, but based in Japan instead of the US. Iris spends a month poring over the books, then gathers her friends to her. You see, as a child, she'd saved several orphans from the slums in the various cities and towns in the duchy. And as these children grew, they swore loyalty to their savior. Iris and her entourage tour the duchy, starting first with the southern reaches, the poorest area. While there, she discovers something that will completely change the fortunes of the poor farmers. Cocoa beans. That's right, chocolate is still undiscovered. A plan begins to form. A plan for her future, as well as the future of the duchy. Iris sets about making sweeping changes to the duchy. Roads, education, new businesses. But she does it all from the perspective of an accountant. She knows that everything needs to be paid for. She's not running some charity that'll cost more money than it will raise. Iris has the weight of the entire duchy on her shoulders. But soon, her hard work begins to pay off. But will it be enough? After all, she still has enemies in the capital. The prince hates her guts, and there's something strange about Yuri, the girl who replaced her as Edward's fiancée. In addition to the changes Iris makes to the duchy, she also increases trade with foreign countries. The finale for Book 1 is Iris donning a gown and preparing to attend the annual anniversary celebration in the capital, wearing a dress made from a material that no one had ever seen before: silk. And as she dons the custom-made gown from the lustrous material, she steels herself. Her armor was fitted, and it was time to head to the battlefield. Now, I mentioned earlier that purchasing all the books on Bookwalker was a mistake. Let me explain. The story of Iris running the duchy concludes in Book 5, but there are 6 novels currently translated into English. Book 6 is the story of her mother. I do intend to read it, as she is absolutely the best character in the series, but explaining why would be a serious spoiler, so I won't. If you want to find out why Iris Lana Almeria is the second best girl behind her mother, Marilis Reiser Almelia, you'll have to read the series yourself. I did want to point out that the art in this series is stunningly gorgeous, and if you don't mind spending extra money to complete the story, please do so. However, the manga is currently in the middle of Book 3 of the light novel series, so if you want to read the entirety of Iris' story, you can pick up all 5 of those books. Now, I did want to talk a bit about the genre and what you can expect while reading it. I got the feeling that this was a josei isekai, which I am a big fan of. Josei tends to use a more realistic art style, but more importantly, the characters aren't as tropey as shoujo series. Shoujo and shonen are full of tropey characters that are more caricatures, but josei and seinen tend to have more well-rounded, realistic people. Shoujo stories tend to be more about wish fulfillment or the power of friendship or love overcoming all obstacles, while in josei stories, the characters overcome their obstacles with hard work, determination, and intelligence. If you're having trouble figuring out if a story is josei or shoujo, ask yourself, which character is the obvious tsundere? Which one is the kudere? If you can't immediately point out the dandere in the story, that means you're probably reading a josei. Accomplishments of the Duke's Daughter also focuses more on politics and economic issues, so the genre was similar to Realist Hero. The ideas Iris presents are all common sense to anyone alive today, but revolutionary to a medieval society. One scene in particular that gave me joy was when she worked with the heads of the Merchant Guild and introduced them to the idea of double-entry bookkeeping. Their minds were blown, and it was all Iris could do to keep the smug look of satisfaction off her face. My wife, who has done accounting, was highly amused at this scene. One more thing you should know. The world is different from ours, but there's no magic. No spells are cast, no elves, no dwarves, no dragons. Everyone is human, and even the animals seem very Earth-like. This isn't a Tomei game after all. So if you're wanting high fantasy with lots of adventure, this isn't it. However, if you're wanting a wonderful isekai with great characters, good pacing, and a fun story, you should check out the first 5 books of Accomplishments of the Duke's Daughter. You can order up to Volume 6 either in paper or digitally on Bookwalker. Link to both in the description below. I want to once again thank Mr. Waffles for recommending this series, and you for tuning in and watching it. Once again, a huge shout out to my editor Cute Stuff. I couldn't make these videos without her. If you'd like to hire her to edit your own videos, there's a link to her Fiverr page below. Please like and subscribe for more content, or you can click here for additional videos. Stay safe, and I'll see you all again next time on Musings by Damon.